Chapter 10. "You can just stop snapping at me right now," Betty yelled at her husband. "Damn it, woman, don't touch my stuff. I have it just the way I want it," he yelled back at her. "This room is a sty, and I'm not having it in my house one more day. It's my house. I paid for it." "It's my house too, Dick." She said his name with an extra harsh inflection to indicate that she may be calling him a name rather than using one. "See? That just goes to show how well you listen. After over 30 years of marriage, you'd think you know by now that I prefer Rich, or even Richard. You can even call me angrily by my full name to yell at me like I'm a child. Maybe you can even count to 3. Well, stop acting like a child and keep your damned room clean. Look at this." She held up a pair of old pants that she found on the floor after moving endless boxes of paperwork that she didn't even think needed to be kept. The jeans were folded up sloppily and were so stiff that they wouldn't unfold while she dangled them. "And there's food on them." Something had crusted over on one of the legs and was flaking off. She would vacuum it up, if she could create a path big enough for a vacuum cleaner to get through. "Get out of here now. It's my room, my office. Go mess around with your own room." "My sewing room is nice and neat, as is the rest of the house, despite you leaving all your dirty laundry and dishes lying around everywhere. Don't worry, though. The little elves are able to get to those every day to try and keep this place presentable. This mess, however, is no longer off limits. If my sinuses act up from all the crap you have in here one more time, I'm going to just bulldoze through it." "Come on now, stop it. I know where everything is in here. You're ruining my system. I won't be able to find anything." "You can't find anything now. Remember the taxes? Lost in here somewhere. I had to go down to the post office on April 15th to get the forms again and refile them and get them out just in time after you had done them in your office. Remember?" "Well," was all he could manage, but he still said it with every bit of justified emphasis. "Well, nothing." She stopped rummaging and stood up and placed her hands on her hips. "I've never been beaten by a room before, but I don't know if Lysol is going to cut it here. I might just need a gas can and a match." "All right now, that's enough," he bellowed. It was his serious voice. Betty held her ground in his room. She brushed her gray hair behind her ears to get it out of her face. "There are important things in here. I can write several more books on the treasures I've got hidden in here. Treasures that the world should see and information that people should know." "Well, that'll be the day when you start making something practical out of all this. Honestly, Rich, you spend too much time teaching at that university. We are almost in our golden years here, and I would like to start enjoying them properly. I would love it if you stayed home and started writing again." "Now don't start up on that, too. We need the income." "Bless it, woman, you are on a roll today. What's gotten into you?" She sighed. "I'm just punchy, I guess, from sleeping with the lights on for so long now. From wondering what you would do if I weren't around and there was a blackout. Then what? That's what the generator is for. That hunk of junk hasn't been tested in years. Besides, you wouldn't even get to it in time, and you know it. It doesn't even give peace of mind. It does to me. Are you finally tired of living with me and all my bullshit?" She sighed again, put her hands on her hips, and smiled sympathetically at him. "No, not at all. We're just getting old. Too damn fast. What would you do if something were to happen to me?" "Oh, come on, let's not start this up, too." "I mean it. What would you do if I died and then months later there was a blackout?" "Well, I don't know exactly." That calmed her down. "I'm glad to finally hear you admit it. The situation might beat me one day. You're glad I know this?" "Yes, actually I am. I'm tired of pretending that everything is normal all the time. This is not how other people have to live." "Is it really that much of an impact on you after all these years?" "The impact isn't on me at all. You're the one I'm worried about." "Well, stop it," he said to her calmly. She walked over to him and stumbled on a box on her way. They hugged each other. "Try not to worry so much," he said softly to her. "How?" He said sweetly to her. "I plan on dying far before you." "Oh, you!" She smacked him on the back and tried to pull away. He hugged her tighter. She relaxed, and they both giggled at each other's foolishness while they embraced. "You know what?" she said seductively in his ear. "What?" "I still want that damn room cleaned," she said as unromantically as possible. He pushed her away from him. "Damn it, woman!" She laughed and then abruptly stopped. Someone was knocking on their front door. The longest part, mileage-wise, of Rob's journey had been the most uninteresting. He was glad for that. It was time for an uneventful stretch. He had checked out of the hotel around noon, feeling a little pouty about giving up his sanctuary. It also had been the grounds on which he had the dream that ripped the killer to shreds. He would miss that place. Maybe if it all somehow ended up all right, he could stop by again on his way back, if he had enough funds left over. He hadn't had any more dreams that he could remember, but that didn't mean he hadn't had them. He figured they must have just been more of the same. If he had dreamt of what the killer was seeing, then it must have just been a mundane section of his day. The fucker was probably driving around, hopefully heading north as Rob had insisted he do, looking for him, or trying to hone in. Rob thought that if anything more intense than that happened, or if they'd had another mind meld in the dreamy limbo land, then he would have recalled it by that late point in the day. He hoped he hadn't missed out on any pertinent information. He shrugged, telling himself that if he was meant to know something, then he would. He had wanted to be at his destination earlier in the day, but the trip had taken almost 9 hours. He had pictured himself sitting on the front porch, chatting with the old guy, while they sipped some lemonade and watched the magic hour come. Magic hour had come, and it had gone, hours ago. He had only stopped to get some fast food, which he had eaten on the road, and to get gas a couple of times. The car's gas mileage was ridiculously low. He wondered if it had a leak. He pictured Sue's car leaving a flaming trail where the tires had been, like a much wimpier and slower-moving version of the Back to the Future DeLorean. He had gone as fast as the car would allow, but he was driving at 20 miles less than 88 miles per hour. He thought briefly about postponing until the next day, so that he could arrive at a more sociable, daylit hour, but at the same time he was ready to get the show going. He also didn't want to look for some crappy motel, or spend one more night in the car to save cash before he had made any further progress. If he did, he would just sit there wasting time, acquiring travel fatigue, waiting to meet the man he came to see the next day, which felt so far away. He was parked in front of their house. It was really nice. Not too big, but definitely the house of the middle class. The book's note on the author had not lied. He did live in Redding, California, even after all the years after its publication. Rob could see why he was still there. Who would give up a sweet pad like that? Also, this city was much more enjoyable and prettier than L.A. People were nicer. Cars weren't riding his ass once he passed a certain point. California was quite a diverse state, after all, but it ought to be for its size. He wondered if Texas was just as varied, or if it was a whole hell of a lot of the same thing. He had found the exact address in the phone book. There was only one matching name. It had to be him. The hunt turned out to be very simple for Rob. He had based so much of this trip on trust and hope that it would turn out okay, and it seemed to be doing just that. Finding the address so easily was very reassuring. He couldn't believe that the phone book he had picked up, that was attached to a payphone, was for just the right area code he wanted. If he had wanted to find someone back in L.A., he wouldn't be able to find them without looking through the proper area's phone book. He got out of his car and walked up their driveway. He stepped up onto the porch. He could hear them talking inside. That must be his wife in there with him. The author's note said that he was married, but did not mention any children. Maybe it was better he had gotten there after 9 p.m. They should be done with their dinner. He needed their time and attention, and it was important, so he did not want to interrupt while they could be distracted. He was suddenly nervous, feeling a bit of social anxiety. He would be broaching some rather strange subject matter with strangers. He brought up his knuckles, paused, and then finally rapped them on the front door. He heard their talking and laughing stop. He braced and waited for the door to be answered. Rob heard them asking each other who it might be, and then they were arguing over which one of them should answer the door. They were speaking freely, as if their voices weren't carrying right on through the door and out into the night. Finally the door flung open. It was an older man standing there. It must be him, but Rob had pictured him as being older. The man was past middle age, but not way past. He was balding on top, but had a thick ring of yellow-gray hair around the sides and back of his head. He wore rather stylish bifocals. He had a well-groomed beard that was slightly darker than his head hair, and it hung a few inches below his chin. He was wearing a red plaid shirt and brown khakis with sneakers. There was a woman of approximately close age to the man standing behind him, looking a little worried. She had shoulder-length gray hair and had a naturally aged and distinguished face that could be described as handsome if not striking. She wore a t-shirt tucked into blue jeans and flip-flops. The couple looked like they were all right people. They looked down to earth and approachable. People from around the area must not be very wary of strangers. No one down south ever opened the door without checking through a peephole or putting the chain across it first. Surely they must know the ways of the world, but maybe their knowledge of the otherworldly made them less afraid in the ordinary plane of existence. The only apparent ice to break was the slightly suspicious look on the woman's face. The man almost looked like what Santa Claus must look like on his time off and on an Atkins diet, hopefully not one of reindeer meat. Rob felt himself relax. "Well, what the hell do you want?" the man barked with surprising power in his voice. Rob felt himself tense right back up. He gulped. "Whatever you're selling, we're not buying. Go away." The man began to close the door. Rob had seen the name on the mailbox on his way up the driveway, so he knew he had the right house. "Mr. Grazer?" "It's Dr. Grazer, and who wants to know?" I'm not selling anything. I wanted to talk to you about your book. Rob held it up. Which one is that? Rob saw the cover was blank. Oh, it's the complete book of modern monsters. I don't have time to talk about whatever silly subject you need for a term paper. Come by my office during working hours. Don't bother me at home. He slammed the door shut. Rob was shocked. He had been caught off guard. The man was a total bastard. Rob stood there wondering what to do. He was too intimidated to knock again. He could go see the man at Reading University the next day, since he knew he worked there from the book section about the author. He did not want to waste all that time, though, over a misunderstanding. He certainly was not a student, and was most definitely not looking for information on something as frivolous as a term paper. He tried to gather the courage to knock again. He was half expecting the man to open the door again with a shotgun. Rob then decided against knocking. He had arrived too late in the day after all. The night would be wasted. He turned around on the porch and took his first step back to the car. The door flung open again. It was the woman standing there. "I'm sorry about my husband. He's been ornery all day. What is it you want?" she asked. The man bellowed behind her that he didn't need any apologies to be made on his behalf, and the young man was rude to show up unannounced, and she was to slam the door in his face right away. "That's enough!" she screamed at the man over her shoulder. Rob jumped at the force of her yell. He was very uncomfortable. The woman smiled sweetly at Rob and asked, "What is it that you want again?" There were no more protests from the man. He had been silenced, but he scowled in the background. "I had some questions about Dr. Grazer's book," Rob said. "Oh, that's very sweet, but maybe you should talk to my husband at school where he has the dean to keep him on a leash." "I'm not here about some stupid paper," Rob said with some impatience. The woman's smile faded. Rob took the drawing out from between the pages of the book, and he held it up to show her. "I'm here about this." Her eyes widened. "In fact, maybe you're the one I should be talking to. This picture is from your website, isn't it?" She turned to look at her husband. "I think we should let him in, Rich." Richard Grazer stomped over to see what the fuss was about. Rob was still holding up the drawing. Dr. Grazer's eyes also widened when he saw it. "Oh my," he said in a much calmer tone. He sighed apologetically. "Why don't you come on in?" "Thank you," Rob said. "I'd like to talk." They opened the door wide for him, and Rob noticed Dr. Grazer's eyes dart around to see if any of the neighbors were noticing the interaction. Rob looked behind him and saw that no one was watching. Dr. Grazer put his hand on Rob's shoulder to pull him inside. "Come on in already." Rob obliged and quickly entered. He felt like maybe he was walking into the home of some crazy people, but he would humor them until he got the information he had come for. Mrs. Grazer closed the front door once they were all inside. They were standing in the living room. "Please sit," she said to Rob. She motioned to the sofa. "Thank you," Rob said again, and he sat down and sunk into the sofa's cushion. He noticed the warmth of the room. The walls were tea-stained, and the room's lamplight was soft but plenty bright. It felt like magic hour after all. The home was too tastefully decorated for these people to be too crazy. Rob noticed they had no TV. Maybe they were a little crazy. Mrs. Grazer sat on the adjacent love seat, and Dr. Grazer sat in a recliner on the other side of the room. Mrs. Grazer instantly stood back up. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Where are my manners? Would you like something to drink?" "Yes, please," Rob said. He had pictured the talk with a beverage. He also wanted to root himself in a bit, in case they thought he was the crazy one, and holding on to one's dishes was a good way to do just that. He would be heard, and all the way through. "What would you like?" she asked. "Anything would be fine," he replied. "Some tea?" "Sure." "I'll be right back." She excused herself. Rob sat there with Dr. Grazer staring at him. He felt like he should start the conversation. "I really like your book, Dr. Grazer." The man nodded. "Most of it is bullshit." Rob had no idea how to respond. "Call me Rich." "All right, Rich." "It appears you have weeded through the bullshit to find a bit of truth." He motioned at the picture beside Rob's lap. Rob looked down thoughtfully at the sheet of paper. "Yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about." "What should I call you?" "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm a bit rattled. I'm Rob Barton." He got up to shake Rich's hand. Rich waved his hand, motioning strongly for him to just sit down and forget formalities. "You can call my wife Betty." She came back in the room. "The tea will be ready in a few minutes." "Betty," Rich said, "this is Rob." "Hello," she said, waving at him as she went back to the love seat. "Hi," Rob said back to her, feeling the urge to get back up and shake her hand, but repressing it. "Well, Rob, looks like you found something there." She nodded her head at the drawing just as her husband had. "You're the one who found it," he replied to her. "What do you want to know about it?" she asked. "I'm already very familiar with its subject matter already. I want to know more, though. Can I ask you guys some questions?" They both nodded.